Hey y'all, welcome to the Coyote Trapping School podcast. I'm your host Chris Pope as always. Before we get into the episode, definitely want to thank our sponsors, Cots Bros Lures. It's that time of the year, spring beaver trapping, nuisance trapping is kicking off. You know, I'm getting calls. A lot of folks are seeing foxes with pups and beavers out and about, and just that springtime of the year seems to be a pretty good flush of wildlife activity and people getting to noticing things. So if you're getting calls, if you can get out with the COVID thing and do some work, and you need some trapping supplies, some bait and lure, hit up Cots Bros Lures for all your trapping needs. If you got some glands, I probably should clear this with Kyle, Kyle Cots, but if you got some glands and you're interested in getting rid of them, castor glands, any kind of coyote glands, skunk essence, shoot them a message, give them a call, and I think they'll be happy to deal with you on that gland front too. That's what I'm intending to do, so I hope they are. But they list all that stuff. They got their prices of what they want on their web, or what they offer on the website. So definitely follow up with them. That's people ask me a lot, what I do. You can ship your castor to some of the auctions or take them to the auctions. But in the past, I've always found, with my string of castors that I gather up, my best bang for my buck is always trading them with supply dealers, whether it's at conventions or whatever. And so that's what I intend to do with the skunk essence and the beaver castors that I've got this year too. I need the supplies anyways, and so like helping these guys out that I deal with. I hope it's helping them out, swapping them glands for supplies. And so look up Cots Bros. You need trapping supplies. Next season is going to be here before we know it. Although the summer, if it's a long and hot one, we'll be begging for it. So now getting into the episode. This is part 2 of the interview with Kyle Waltz. If you are just tuning into this, you missed part 1, definitely go back and listen to part 1. Kyle is a hard-charging entrepreneur. He's built several, grown several wildlife control businesses, sold a couple, and then he's currently growing, another one, opening multiple locations. And he's got a podcast called the Wildlife Control Podcast, where he gets pretty deep into the specifics and the tactics of growing the business and operating the business. And this just, to me, that's a wealth of information for someone that is interested in building, growing, starting a wildlife removal, wildlife nuisance trapping, whatever you want to call it, business. So definitely go back and listen to part 1 if you missed it. And this is part 2, wrapping up. Again, you can contact Kyle. He's on Instagram, kyle.waltz, KYLE.WALTZ. And then I'll link to all of the different companies that he's involved with. And, of course, the Wildlife Control Podcast. Look that up wherever you listen to podcasts. And I would encourage you to subscribe to that, because it's definitely a wealth of information and a lot of good information that, at the very least, will give you plenty to think about and chew on as you consider if you are building, starting, growing a nuisance trapping business. So with that, we'll get right into the interview and wrap it up. Thank y'all for listening.
Yeah. So talking about data tracking and all, I know from listening to the pest control podcasts, there's some software that you can kind of manage your customers and even your technicians through. Is there any kind of software on the wildlife side or anything that y'all use to manage dispatching to jobs and different things like that?
We've been very old-fashioned over the years. Right now, we're transitioning to Pest Pack.
Yeah.
But we've used other like CRMs like HubSpot. We use a lot of spreadsheets still.
Sure.
Sometimes that can be bad. I know that we are behind the ball there. But I think part of the reason why too is a lot of that software, not all of it, but the pest control focused software like Pest Pack, it's not cheap.
Right.
So that's something that costs a good bit of money, and for a smaller organization, I would highly suggest you don't use it,
right,
unless somebody else is paying for it for you.
Right.
Because cash is everything. And, PestPack is a routing tool. I think you can process credit cards through it. Obviously it's like a built-in CRM. The reports that you can pull out of that thing are amazing, without a doubt. And they are, reporting is extremely important, but you can certainly do it without it. So for years, we ran our business just with Google Calendars, Google Sheets. Google is free.
Right.
And there's a lot of tools with Google that people don't realize. So you just got to go in there and play with it. There's budgeting tools. There's financial tools. There's all kinds of good stuff with that.
Yeah.
We use QuickBooks for accounting, which is great. It's very helpful in us running the business and getting reports when we need them. But yeah, that data, your sales data, your scheduling, all that stuff, it is very important.
Right. So one thing that I think a lot of new trappers and new folks trying to get into the industry do a bad job of is charging enough.
Yeah.
Can you give us some ideas or pointers about how to appropriately think about how we're charging and make sure that we're charging what we should be, what our value is?
Yeah. You should not think that you're any less than the big guys. If the biggest company in our industry is charging X, you should charge X also. Maybe you charge a little bit less, but if you're going less, let's think about that for a second. If you're reducing what the big guys think the value of that service is, and they put a lot of thought into that.
Right.
I can promise you, they put a lot of thought in that. You're discounting yourself. Like, you think you're less valuable than the technicians for these other companies? Why would you do that?
Right.
If you're just as good as they are, you should be charging what they charge. And there are companies, their strategy is to charge a lot less than everybody else. And that might work when you're really, really small. I know when I first started out, I was charging so little for things. And the reason I was charging so small was I was afraid. I was afraid of rejection. I was afraid that the customers were going to say no, and I wasn't going to get the sale at all. And it was because I just didn't have enough opportunities.
Right.
I didn't have enough leads coming in. When I was starting out, I would get like 2 or 3 leads a week.
Yeah.
And when I got a lead, I was going to sell it.
Right.
Even if it was
needed every one of those.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of them, I couldn't even afford to get to the lead. Couldn't have any gas. So I had to go borrow $5 from somebody to get gas in my tank to get to the lead and get a check so I could get the check deposited and get a trap for the job and come back and get it set up. So, you shouldn't charge any less, in my opinion, than the big players, because you're just hurting the whole industry as a whole. And also, if you want to grow your business, you got to remember that some of the customers that you have today are still going to be around when you're a big business. And the last thing you want is to have to tell a bunch of people, hey, we're bigger now, I got to charge you more.
Right.
So, and we have had to grandfather some people in that I sold in the beginning of the business that are still with us now. We didn't want to change their price because, they're a valuable customer. We're still making money off of them. Man, we could have made a lot more had I made some better decisions early on. So, don't discount yourself.
Yeah.
There's a reason why the prices are what they are. When you're cutting them in half, you're just taking money out of your own pocket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what a lot of us don't do is sit down and think about what are all the true costs that are going into doing a job, like your cell phone, like your vehicle, your tires, your insurance, not just your company insurance, but your vehicle insurance, gas.
Yeah.
You got to value your time. If you're not, then And then another thing that I went through a kind of a project recently and thought about it is talking about at the end of the day, doing all your reports and filling out your data. I mean, that's going to take a couple hours that you need to be getting billed. You need to be billing somewhere, so you need to factor that into your costs as well.
Yeah, there's so much to do. There's so much to do. It's exhausting. But yeah, no, you have to figure that out. We try, when you're a one-man show, I think you should be running close to about a 50% margin. Some people might disagree with me. That's just in our own experience. Whenever we've created a one-man show operation, we remove the big overhead, just him on his own. It's about a 50% margin. And as we grow, 25%, 20% is kind of our goal. Some markets that we're in do less than that. Some of them do 10. Some of them do 5. But our goal as a whole is 20 to 25%. That's completely out the door. Like, all expenses are handled.
Right.
We paid our office rent. We paid everything, and that's what's left. It doesn't always work out that way. So for us, it just depends on the sales rep and the technicians, and making sure all the jobs are priced correctly. Because you decrease those job prices, obviously that's going to affect your bottom line, your profit, your take home pay. So you got to consider that. But yeah, like you said, you should sit down. You should figure out all of your costs. What expenses are there that I cannot live without to run my business? And what expenses are there going to be in the future that I don't have yet that I know I'll need when I'm bigger? Because if you do want to be bigger, you should be thinking about that today.
Right.
And sometimes it's very difficult. I had a meeting earlier this morning, and it was in regards to where we're going to be in a year.
Yeah.
And we're planning for that financially. So you just got to think about those things.
Yeah, and even, talking about the bigger part, I know there's a lot of folks that are not going to want to grow to 10 plus locations. But even if you just, trapping and running a business in your area, in my opinion, it's worthwhile to at least give the thought of hiring at least one other person, because anytime that you want to take time off, you're losing money, and you may not be able to take the time off because you realize that, hey, this is going to cost me X amount of dollars to go on this trip, not to mention whatever the trip costs. So
you can trap yourself,
right? Yeah, exactly.
As a trapper in your own business. Because look, I know guys that paint houses for a living. I know guys that cut grass. I know guys that cut trees. I got a lot of buddies that work in the blue collar industry, and it's different there than it is with us because of the sense of urgency. Like, nobody's going to call you in the middle of the night saying, "Paint my wall."
Right.
They're not calling in the middle of the night and saying, "I need my grass cut right now." We get those calls. We get a snake call at 7 p.m. on a Friday, and they want it done right then and there.
Yeah.
And if that lead for me, if I look at it probably a lot different than a lot of people, I'm not worried too much about the $289 for the snake or the $300 or whatever you're going to charge the person to go out and get the snake. I'm thinking that customer probably has a rodent issue or might have a rodent issue.
Right.
Or that person might own a bunch of apartment complexes, or they might work for somebody that owns a bunch of apartment complexes, or they might work for somebody that is a huge warehouse that has bats. Like, I go way deep.
Yeah. So
every lead for us we want to get to. And I had a buddy that works in our industry, and I introduced him to a very large client in the area that he worked in, and he went on a cruise. So he got the big client. He was a one-man show. Yeah. He got this big client, probably a $100,000 a year client. And right after he got the client, started doing work for him, he said, "Well, hey, I'm going to be gone for 4 weeks, going on my honeymoon." Well, guess what? When he came back, that client wasn't there anymore. They were gone. So, look, in our industry, you've got to be available. You don't have to be available 24 hours a day, but you certainly should be available 7 days a week.
Right.
And it's a one-man show. Like, okay, I'm working 7 days a week in the field. When am I going to do my accounting?
Right.
When am I going to do my admin work? Like, all that stuff piles up, and before you know it, you're like, screw it. I'm not even going to do it. Mm-hmm. And now I don't even know how I'm running my business.
Right.
Like, I don't know the numbers. I don't know the sales. I have no idea. All I know is I got money in my account, and I got a bunch of customers that need service.
Yeah.
And it piles up. So, you want to get to a point to where you should at least have a little bit of freedom for yourself, to where you can hire a manager to manage a few technicians. I think 3 or 4 technicians and a manager is like that first threshold that allows you to kind of get bigger from there. If you want to, if you just want to keep running it where it is, one location, you can certainly do that. But having enough revenue coming in to be able to afford a few technicians and a manager gives you a lot of freedom as an owner, and gives those employees freedom too. Gives them the ability, because if you just have one technician and he's doing everything, that's still really tough on you, because what if he calls in sick?
Right. Right.
You decide you're going to go on vacation, and he's like, I got the flu. I ain't leaving the house. And you got traps that got to be checked.
Yeah.
And the DNR or whoever, they don't care if you're sick. You got to check those traps.
That's right.
So every state's different there, but so yeah, one employee is very risky in my opinion. You should have enough employees to know that if one goes down, I still have somebody else,
right?
Or a couple more people, because that does happen. People have lives. We had a guy earlier this week. A friend of his passed away, so he had to go help that family out and deal with the funeral and all that. And that's not planned. A lot of this stuff is not planned. You don't know when you're going to get sick. You don't know when somebody's going to have a death in the family. Those things happen. And if you're really small, it's certainly going to affect your revenue. If you ever hurt yourself, God forbid you hurt yourself and you can't get out there and service customers. If they've already paid, they're going to be upset.
Right.
They're going to want their money back.
Right.
And now you can't say yes to new customers coming in.
Yep.
So it's extremely risky.
Right.
You can do it. I did it for years. But and luckily I never really had any major problems. But you just never know.
Yep.
You never know. You might. I hope you don't. But you could fall off a ladder, fall off a roof, get in a car accident.
Right.
You just never know. So you got to think about those things.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, talking about those things, then as I've done this, as I get into attics and I'm walking on rafters, evaluating jobs and things, and one thing that's always in the back of my mind is, if my foot goes through this roof or something like that, I've got insurance, right? But have you had any of those situations where you've had to call on that insurance or do something to?
So in 10 years in business, I've never made a claim with our general liability insurance.
Right.
Ever. Have we gone through ceilings? You dang right we have.
Right.
Many times. We do a lot of insulation replacement.
Yeah.
So when you're up there pulling insulation and replacing it, guys get fatigued, especially in the summer.
Sure.
And they're not doing it on purpose. They're
Right.
just really, really tired, and they probably should have come down 30 minutes ago, and they're trying to get it done. And somebody slips a foot through the ceiling.
Yeah.
I have had a guy fall all the way through before, and he was fine. But you gotta be careful. But no, I've never had any claims. Proud to say it, actually.
That's
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Of course, we've had workers' comp claims and
Yeah.
auto insurance claims, but no general liability. So.
Well, can you talk about from the insurance side, so far as the liabilities and what you consider as a bare minimum for somebody just starting out?
Oh man, I think we have like $2 million of coverage.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know all the numbers honestly off the top of my head, but we have enough insurance to where if we burn your house down, we could probably build you a new house.
Right.
I think you should look at when you're first starting out. If you're cautious, you're probably not going to have any issues, and your cash flow is extremely important. So when I was starting out, I got the cheapest insurance possible. That was my state minimum. So every state has different insurance requirements. So I looked at my state's insurance requirements for my line of work, and that's the insurance that I got.
Right.
The cheapest one. And I think it cost me like $70 a month.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different options out there. I will say who we have right now is Christian Baker, which is well known in our industry.
Yeah.
If you are a member of the Nuisance Wildlife Control Operators Association, I think it costs like $400 a year or $500 a year. And that if you have a handful of employees, that is the best insurance for the money. And they focus on wildlife control operators.
Right.
So I actually just met those guys a couple weeks ago in Vegas.
Yeah.
Got to shake their hands and thank them for their dedication to the industry, because that's super helpful for us.
Sure.
But before that, I think I just called like my local agent and got in with a company and stuck with them until we got too big. They weren't willing to go any larger than that. Well, with another company that was overcharging us ridiculously. And the way I looked at it was, we don't have any claims. Nothing's happening. Why is my insurance going up? They were charging us based off of our revenue.
Right.
So as revenue was increasing, they were increasing the insurance, and we weren't having any claims.
Right.
So we were on the auto side, but not on the liability side. So shopped around, and I actually found the Christian Baker policy from another industry guy, former owner of Wildlife Solutions, Steve. He introduced me to them, and it's been extremely helpful for us. I mean, it's all, that's one thing is, when you're running your business and you're really, really busy, it's easy to just cut corners and just buy what's convenient.
Right.
When you're able to work on your business rather than in it, you have a little bit more time to put some serious thought into some of these purchases. Certain costs that are monthly or annual that you're going to have, take the time and shop around, because you might call somebody up and be like, wow, this is a good price. And you write it down, and you write down the name of their company and their phone number and say, okay, I'll get back to you. But then you call somewhere else and it's half as much.
Right.
And it's the same coverage. Insurance is insurance.
Yeah.
So, we have insurance because we're legally required to, honestly.
Right.
I mean, if our customers didn't ask for it as often as they did, I wouldn't even have it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even have the general liability. And if I did, it'd be a lot smaller policy.
Sure.
Because we've never needed it, and I hope we never do.
Right.
And I think you probably should have some of it, but, some of these policies, I think, in my opinion, are kind of silly.
Yeah.
So
you talked about going to the NUCOA meeting in Vegas. So how was that? I assume you're a member of.
I am a member. That was the first meeting I've ever been to, and it was good. It was very informative. I will say that some of it wasn't my favorite, but there was some good stuff. I learned some good things. There were some industry leaders there that were very helpful. It was a networking opportunity for us to learn from other people and help other people. But yeah, overall it was good. Obviously, if you're in Vegas, you're going to have a good time no matter what.
Yeah.
So I think a few of us that I talked to after the fact, after we flew home, we all got a little sick. So there was definitely some bugs floating around up there. Casinos are a dirty place.
Right.
So who knows what the heck I caught. But I was out for a few days, and I had a cough for like 2 weeks, and probably a week ago I finally got over it. So, but no, it was great. I definitely recommend that people go there.
Yeah.
If you're starting out, I think that is a great thing to go to. I think next year it might be in Charleston.
I know it has been in the past.
I can't remember where it is, but no, I'm definitely going to plan on going every year because it was a good experience. I'm looking when I'm going to any conference like that, I'm looking for $1 million.
Right.
And it's the same thing when I open up a book. Where's $1 million? I'm looking for an opportunity for me to increase my revenue and learn something new, and that's a great event to learn from.
That's been on my radar. I appreciate getting somebody's perspective that's been there, but especially for a new person.
Yeah, there's all kinds of courses that you can take
right.
if you want to learn more about just different species that we control. There's so much to know about our industry and all the little things about bats and birds and rats and beavers and everything. You got to constantly be learning about those things. Otherwise, you will get caught in the dark, and your competitors are going to be way ahead of you with new products and new ways to do things.
So, and I'm trying not to draw on a lot of stuff because you've got some podcasts out that cover a lot of this stuff. But you talk about in some of your podcasts you open 11 locations in 11 months.
10.
10. Okay, 10.
10 in 10 months.
10 in 10 months. One a month. That's what I listened to that one, and that's when I sent you an email because I said, I was listening to this, and I've been mulling around with trying to grow this business for a year and a half now.
Yeah.
And you're opening a location in a month.
Well, it took me, that was in 2017. So it took me 7 years to get there.
Right.
And I'd already been in the industry, directly doing nothing but trapping for 9 years. And then, had other industry experience before that. Yeah, I mean, what do you want to know?
Well, so I guess, it definitely took you some time to get there, but at the same time, you're hiring people for roles. You're expecting to be generating jobs and cash flow pretty quick with those.
Immediately.
So what, and I don't want to get into your secrets, but, what's kind of your tactics for, going in a new place in a month and having, work, basically?
Yeah. Leads. One word, leads. You got to get the leads somehow, some way, whether it's through your own websites or you're buying them or whatever. Just be careful about buying them. For us, we didn't really have an exact plan other than we need the leads.
Right.
So we were willing to do whatever it took to get those leads. But we actually found out the leads that we were buying, we were overpaying for them. So as soon as I could get out of them, we got out of them. And our own websites were generating leads after that. Mm-hmm. We still did a little bit of advertising, but it was a lot more controlled advertising, meaning I can turn it off and turn it on whenever it's convenient. But our strategy was really simple, actually. We looked at the entire United States. We knew that we wanted to open up more locations because a third of our revenue in 2016 came from 2 outside territories that we had built that were just one-man shows, sales and service. They weren't doing anything extraordinary. I think each little territory was doing like 150 to 200,000, so not a whole lot in revenue. And we just looked at, okay, where do we want to go and where can we get the leads from? So we found out where we could get leads just by doing our own research, finding companies and doing our own due diligence to find how often are people searching on the internet for our services in those areas. And we focused on the areas that had the biggest opportunities on the front end of those 10 locations. And we kind of created a plan to go in order from one place to the next. I hired one guy to do nothing but go out and open those territories for me. So the process was, first we needed to create a schedule. We went to Tallahassee in January. We went to Charleston in February, Charleston, South Carolina. We went to New Jersey in March, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So we knew we had that plan. We got with a marketing company that was going to give us the leads in that, like they knew the schedule. We know that you're going to open at that time. We wanted the leads to come in a week before we opened them. Why? That way, day one, we already had appointments.
Right.
So while that guy that we hired is training in Jacksonville or wherever he's training, we already had appointments set up for him when he got there.
Right.
So they would fly to Jacksonville typically and train in Jacksonville. We were doing interviews with them at their location, so kind of hard to do, in a risk in itself. There was times where we scheduled 10 interviews in a specific location, which was a flight away and hotel stay and all that. There's cost involved.
Sure.
I have a guy that's getting paid, good salary to go out and do all that, and he has 10 interviews and 2 show up. That happens.
Right.
It's unbelievable. It's amazing that people will do that. No call, no show, nothing. So we had times where we had to fly to certain areas multiple times to do interviews, and we'd go and do them in a hotel and knock them out. And then after we hired them, we'd fly them to Jacksonville. They would stay in a hotel. Again, that costs money.
Right.
They're staying in a hotel for usually at least a week, sometimes 2 weeks. We're training them there on everything. We're showing them all of our operations manuals and running them through the training. And then they have a company truck, which I went and got it financed as we get one location going. Go to the next location and finance another vehicle. They drive that one back to the location, the new location.
Gotcha. And
when they get there, they already have appointments, or at least they already have leads coming in if they don't have appointments.
Right.
We already had an idea of how many leads that we were going to be getting, and it worked flawlessly.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was a piece of cake. It was almost too easy. I mean, there was a lot of work for me as the owner, a ton of paperwork to do business in all of these different states.
Right.
So it took a lot of work to get into the states, to be able to pay employer taxes, and there's a lot of things that I did wrong that cost me millions of dollars, but it was a good experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I had something slip my mind. So what, I guess, kind of winding things up, do you have any recommended books or materials or, anything for, you said, I don't know if I was here when we were eating lunch, that your regret was that you didn't think big enough from the start.
Oh, absolutely. I think what happens is, if you are a one-man show right now, you might not have these huge goals. I think what happens over time is you go from making $50,000 to $100,000 a year, and all of a sudden $200,000 doesn't seem that crazy.
Right.
But when you're making $50,000, $200,000 just seems crazy. And when you're making $200,000, you think, I can make $4, and I can make $8, and then I can make $1 million, and I can make so on and so forth. So knowing that I've kind of hit some of those thresholds over the years, and knowing that I should have just went all the way to begin with, because I would have got there a lot faster. Speed is important, but you also got to be careful, and you also need to be thoughtful about things. So there's not a right or wrong way. I think one thing that really got me in the right mindset was, before I started growing my business, I had that big contract with that pest control company I was talking about earlier that called me up. They were giving me about $230,000, $250,000 a year in revenue. They called me up and they said, "Hey, Kyle, so we're going to start doing all this work in-house now. We don't need you." And I was like, "Oh, God. Are you serious?" They're like, "Yeah, we don't really need you anymore." I'm like, okay. So that revenue paid for a few of our employees.
Right.
So I had to go sit down now with people, and it was only a few of us. It was like I think there's 5 of us at the time, and tell them, "Hey, we are going to have to figure something out here, because I just lost a deal that was paying for several of you guys. We got to figure this out." And we didn't really figure it out that fast, so I had to lay off a few people.
Right.
And it upset me. I remember crying. I don't think my employees really saw that I was crying, but I definitely got teary-eyed, because when you're really small like that and you're working with people for a couple of years, you get really close to them, and they're like family. And my mom was actually working for me at the time, helping me with the accounting and answering the phones, and that was kind of like our receptionist.
Yeah.
And I decided, I was like, you know what, I'm doing something wrong here. I did something wrong. I felt like I really made a huge mistake, even though it really wasn't my fault that they stopped doing business with us. It was a big corporate entity that made those decisions. But I was like, I'm doing something wrong. I don't want to ever have to do this again. So I started to educate myself about business and learn more about the industry, because before I was kind of just on autopilot. I had this great deal. Jobs were coming in every day. I wasn't having to do a whole lot. I was kind of in my little zone, and I got comfortable. Honestly, I got very comfortable. And when you're not growing, there's that risk of contraction, of getting smaller. And that may or may not be what you want, but it's likely to happen when you're not pushing hard to grow. So in business, you got to always be growing, and I was not pushing hard to grow. And the reason I wasn't pushing hard to grow is because I didn't educate myself enough. I wasn't educating myself enough on finances. I wasn't educating myself enough on how to grow a business in general, in any industry.
Right.
So when all that happened, I made that decision of, I'm going to replace music with podcasts and YouTube videos, and I'm not listening to music anymore in the truck. Because I didn't have a whole lot of free time.
Right.
I'm driving everywhere all the time.
Yeah.
Still do now. So I replaced all of the music that I love, that I was listening to, with information from people. I picked people that I could do research on. One of them was Grant Cardone.
Yeah.
And I looked this guy up, and I knew that one of my problems was sales. And a lot of people hate Grant Cardone, and he does some funny things for sure. But this guy knows how to sell, and I know he knows how to train people how to sell because he has a huge sales team. There is no way you can have that big of a sales team if you're not selling anything. So clearly they know how to sell, right? So I'm going to listen to the best person that knows how to sell. So that was the person that I chose, and I really listened to a lot of his free information. It's free. And he has a lot of YouTube videos about growing your business and finances and all these things. And the guy's probably worth close to $1 billion now. And that really changed my mindset because it was like a wake-up call. Like, oh, wait a second, I'm comfortable now. And he's talking about don't get comfortable and all these things that I was doing that were not helping me. There were certain people in my life that were bringing me down, that weren't giving me the right mindset to grow. There's going to be people in your life when you make that decision of I'm going to be the best person that I can be that are not going to like it,
right?
Because they don't want to be the best person that they want to be, or they do, but they're not willing to put in the work. That's the reality. Is anybody can do whatever they want to do, but most people are not willing to put in the work.
Right.
Most people are not willing to get up at 4 a.m. every day.
Right.
Most people are not willing to work 12, 15 hours a day. There's so many distractions these days. So I got rid of a lot of those distractions, just put my head down and focused, and I really have never lifted my head up since then, of going as hard as I can to be the best that I can be. And that education, that self-education through podcasts, of listening to people like Grant, finding Michael Gerber, the guy that wrote the E-Myth, Work on Your Business, Not in It. And ever since then, I read and I get information every single day. Like my schedule is I wake up at 4, I read for an hour or listen to a podcast for an hour. I work out for an hour. I take a shower, then I head to work. And I'll work for 10 to 12 hours, come home, eat dinner, do a little bit more work, go to bed, do it over again. And the weekends, kind of the same thing, but I don't put a full 10, 12 hours in. Usually I'm just working a few hours.
Right.
And that's my schedule. So getting all that education is super important because you can't expect to achieve great things in business if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And nobody's born knowing what to do in business.
Right.
You got to learn. And I suggest you learn from somebody who has proven experience.
Right.
Not just anybody, because there's some guys out there that don't have any experience. The only experience that they have is telling other people how to run their business.
Yep.
So you just got to be careful. So I only listen to people that have very high net worths from growing their own companies and actually growing a legit business, not just a business that's selling people other business stuff.
Right.
So yeah, that's been very, very helpful, and I think that was a game changer. And I think we were talking about thinking big, right?
Yeah.
So that's when I started to think big, and looking back at, I was telling you this earlier, looking back at 10 locations in 10 months, why didn't I do 20? Why didn't I do 100? So you just have to realize that as you hit certain thresholds, I think your mind's going to expand, even though right now you might not be thinking, oh, I'm not going to want all that, or I don't want to do all that. I would suggest you just go for it anyways.
Right. Because
when you go really, really big, if you only go halfway, if you only make it halfway there, you're still doing really good.
Yeah.
If you only make a fourth of the way there, you're still doing really, really good.
Right.
And it's easy to compare yourself to other people and think that, oh, I'm doing so much better than this person, though. I don't even think about that. I focus on my own stuff, my own business. I don't really know what everybody else is doing in revenue, and I only look at the really top players. I don't look at the guys that are, equal or below me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm focusing on Rollins, Terminex, ServiceMaster, Anti-C-Max, Rent-A-Kill, all those big companies in our industry. That's who I'm looking at. I'm not looking at anybody else, because they're doing something that's very impressive. So I think that's who you should be learning from.
Right. So one thing I wanted to touch on, and kind of you hit on your story there, but you talk in your podcast about subcontracting.
Yeah.
And, going out and reaching out and to all your competitors.
Yeah.
Something that,
Yeah.
but not as going to be the top of mind for everybody.
No, hey, you know what's really funny about that is I'm not going to say who it is, but there's a company in the southeast, a wildlife control company, and I reached out to them randomly one day and actually formed a great relationship with them. And he had a multi-location business. I have a multi-location business. We were about around the same size, I think. He may have been a little bit bigger. I'm not really sure. I don't know his numbers, but as if he ever had a location go down and he had the leads coming in, he would give me the leads for free. Hey, I have a guy down in that area. You want the leads? Sure. If I had that happen, I gave him the leads.
Right.
I scratched his back, he scratched mine. So we had that business relationship. We never hung out outside of work, but you just never know. You never know. You're going to get people that aren't going to tell you anything and aren't going to help you. But then you might run into somebody like myself that I will help you. Like if somebody reaches out to me and wants help, I'm going to help them.
Right.
Certainly not going to give away a sale or anything like that if I can do it myself. But I think that as an industry, we are very small. I said this earlier. We're such a small industry, and I think you'll be very surprised to see that. And I saw that at the Wildlife Expo in Vegas. A lot of us can work together, and there's opportunities out there for sure. When you reach out to pest control companies and other wildlife companies, you got to think there are companies out there that get too much business. They can't get to it fast enough. They might be booked up for 2 months with exclusion work or with insulation work. There's an opportunity there. They might do it themselves, but if they're not willing to have their customers wait that long, a lot of them will sub it out.
Right.
And they'll still, they'll take a little bit of a fee on that. They're not giving you the whole job.
Yep.
They're subbing you out. So let's say the job's $1,000. They're going to give it to you for $800 or $500. So if it works for you, then hey, go for it. So there's tons of opportunities there with pest control companies and other wildlife control companies.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, that's something, like I said, I really appreciate the tactical nature of your podcast and the stuff.
I try to be detailed.
Yeah, that you can just take and put into application and stuff that, somebody from the outside looking in is not going to call their neighboring or the little bit bigger wildlife company in their area and say, hey, I just want to introduce myself. I do the same job you do.
Yep. So you should go to the front page of Google, search wildlife control or whatever keyword you want to search, and you should call every company on that thing. You should look up the owners of those companies on LinkedIn and message them and go to lunch with them. You might not get anything as far as like leads from them. You might not get any subcontracting from them, but you might just get a little slice of information of something that they're doing that can really help you out.
Right.
They might say, hey, we're using this new product. Have you ever heard of it? And you're like, oh my God, I've been looking for something just like that. You just don't know. So, business, a big part of business is relationships and networking, just like we're doing right here, right now.
Right.
And there's just little things that you can learn from other people that can highly benefit you. If you stay locked up behind closed doors all the time, nobody's going to know about you. And, more times than not, I've had opportunities from meeting with competitors.
Right.
There's been a few bad experiences for sure.
Sure.
But I think there's been more good than bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else you wanted to touch on or hit on?
I want to know a little bit about your business. So, what do you think? What do you think that you can do, or have you thought about how big you want to be, or where you want to go with yours?
I don't know. I know that I want to be the business owner perspective. For a long time I had this dream, this idea of just being kind of a one-man show, but with a family and just the one-man show doesn't give you the freedom and flexibility that people think of when they want to have their own business.
Right.
So that from that perspective, I don't know where that puts me, but I would like to have, a small business with, multiple technicians, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, maybe we can go over that after the podcast. I can give you some information.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's certainly an opportunity where you service. Absolutely, there's an opportunity to build as big of a company as you want there or other places too.
Right.
So certainly doable. It really doesn't matter where you live. If you're in an area that has a good population, that's really all that matters, because there's wildlife in all 50 states.
Right.
Maybe there's some areas of Antarctica you probably don't want to operate in.
Right.
But besides that, I think there's certainly opportunities everywhere. You just need it's really what creates our industry is human population and wildlife come together.
Right.
So typically it's an urban environment. You can certainly work out in the country and out in the woods with landowners, but I think you're very limited there.
Right.
A lot of people out there, like myself, they shoot their problems.
Yep.
They're not worried about hiring anybody. They'll just do it on their own.
Right.
So, it's just about getting out there. We already talked about getting the leads, figuring out a way to just close that gap between the customer and your business.
Yeah.
So that they know about you. Because if they don't know about you, they're not going to hire you.
Yep, that's the key.
So it's just about getting in front of them somehow, some way. Obviously, the internet's important. The referrals are important from other companies, but it's certainly there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, man, I appreciate you making the drive and meeting up with me.
Yeah, man.
So give everybody, how they can follow along with you, wherever you want to direct them to.
So you can of course listen to my podcast, Wildlife Control Podcast. You can find it anywhere. You can email me, Kyle@firstcoastwildlife.com. I'm typically will respond to people within 24 to 48 hours, depending on the day. And you can follow me on social media. Really only use Instagram. You can just search Kyle Waltz. It's Kyle.Waltz. Follow me on there. I'm not extremely active, not as active as I should be at least, but it's because most of my life is pretty boring sitting behind a desk. So I could send you a selfie every day, but that's about it. My days are pretty boring for the most part, or I'm driving. So I travel probably, lately it's been like 50% of the time. Before that it was like 80% of the time for work.
Right.
So it's not so bad right now. But yeah, you can find me there.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll talk in a year or so, and I can give you a lot of good updates.
Absolutely. Hopefully before that.
That's right.
Cool. All right, man. Appreciate it.